This is the Leadership in Insurance podcast, brought to you by FinPro Search Partners.
Insurance companies are businesses and they need to look for the long term and be sustainable.
We went from 0 to 1 and now it's going from 1 to 100.
Insurance as a concept, as a kind of service, is brilliant. The execution is what we're looking at now.
I think the companies that are going to succeed are the ones that are going to understand and master the art of intent.
When we talk about innovation, we lean too heavily to think about technology and we don't think about creating a culture of innovation.
I think innovation is essentially continuous improvement of existing processes and platforms and product.
Right? It's got to be easy. It's got to be seamless.
Good morning and welcome to the Leadership in Insurance podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bond, and I'm very lucky today to be joined by Heather, who is CEO of Clara Analytics. Heather, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Alex. Thank you so muI for having Clara on your podcast this morning.
Not at all. No, thank you. We were saying just before we hit record, I think you're a business I've tried to work with on the recruitment standpoint before. And I haven't managed to lure you in, but your team came to me, so I feel quite honoured to have you on. Honoured to have you on. And they're very effective people, so maybe I should try and get them to do the business development for me. They're going to stand.
Thanks for the feedback.
No, not at all. Well, look, Heather, I've been watching from afar, and there's obviously you've been in the press quite a lot lately as well. But just for people that aren't aware, because we have an insurance and insurtech audience, who is Heather Wilson and who are Clara Analytics? We'd love to hear.
Sure. Well, thanks again, Alex. And Clara Analytics is an AI claims platform. After first notice of loss, we put our models and our data utilities to work to try to understand what is this case that we have just received, both from a carrier or self-insured customer segment, and we're trying to understand the severity of it. We're trying to understand how can we help both the claims professional who is servicing the claimant and making sure that we're working on a good outcome on both sides of it. We work in a workers' comp and in the liability lines of auto and general liability. We're end to end. Sometimes we call ourselves the kitchen sink, looking at anything that can be detected in that file to help get to a really good outcome on both sides.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. That's fascinating. There's so much going on in this space at the moment, and everyone knows I'm a claims nerd, so I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I know we're going to take some sort of broader conversations about talent, and you know, I think you can't have a conversation about AI-driven technologies that aid, assist, help in an area like claims without talking about talent, because there's clearly an impact there. But I want to come back to that. Something that you and I talked about when we were doing the prep call was just about your background that I think is interesting, because you've worked you've had lots of leadership roles, but you've driven innovation at scale, and I think that's something I'm really interested in. And just wanted to get your view when we're looking at technologies like this. It's going to mean change, it's going to mean innovation at scale. So, in your view, how do large corporate insurance businesses prepare for that sort of scale of innovation that's required?
It's true. I have worked in a lot of Fortune 50 companies driving innovation, sometimes before my time, which is okay, and sometimes just really pausing to make sure that we do understand the true application of getting something in the workflow. I think that a lot of organizations right now, whether they have jumped in at some point of an entry into their AI journey as a chief claims officer or, the president of a claims organization, they're really, trying to figure out where does this fit in their workflow so that one, they can get that adoption, they can understand where is that impact, where is the business case going to come to life for them. And we spend a lot of time just training, retraining, really understanding. I've grown up in data and analytics over 25 years, understanding the stiff arm. What is the stiff arm? What is the change that people are, dealing with here? And we have to keep in mind that we're dealing with multi-generational claims professionals now in our industry. So we've always talked about multi-generational wealth. Well, I always talk about it from a claims professional. So we have, right, the Gen Zs, the millennials that are 1 point of experience. And then we obviously have the boomers that have left and retired, and we have the Gen X that are leading the claims professionals. That is 2 different mindsets when you're thinking being a chief claims officer. And that is not an easy, deck of cards to deal with.
Mm. Yeah, that is quite challenging, actually. I think about this all the time. I think about that from a challenge perspective, just in any team, when you've got these different kind of generations, people are interested in things at different points, and there's we've seen that in insurtech, right, haven't we? We've seen people being
Yeah.
very new entrants and be quite disrespectful of like the knowledge bank that sits there, and
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Yes.
The kind of assumption. My favorite one, I actually had a guest on earlier who runs an innovation team in a big insurance entity, and we were talking about people came in, and from a tech stack perspective, there's a lot of kind of like tech people from outside the industry coming into the industry and going, "Oh, all the tech stack is broken, or this legacy tech is worthless." And I remember, the first time I spoke to a CTO, went, "No one knows more than me
Yeah.
how poor my tech stack is, but
Yes.
we're not set up to deal with it and deal with innovation at scale." So it was a really interesting conundrum
I
there.
think that is one of so if I look at 2 things, one is, okay, I've got multi-generational talent in my claims organization, and how do I need to make sure that both feel good, okay? Because both have different expectations coming in. Okay, so one is just going to grab a Clara AI platform. The other is going to be like, I've known this, I have experience, I would have already made this, judgment call, which is great, which means our models are working. On the other side of it, you're exactly right, Alex. So I think that there's a whole momentum right now of how do you get the best out of your legacy so that you can also be a part of the new AI. And so, that's where InsurTech, I'm not talking about point solutions, but
No.
yes, we're an AI platform, but we're also a data engineering platform too. So we try to make sure we can get to their data, that we can normalize it, standardize it, because we're not in there at the workflow level. We're the one level above, trying to make sure that we're popping up using all of your data, all of every data point out there. We're trying to get a hold of that in every form. And how do we do that? We free it for you. We free that data. We're able to use all the data that's coming in, right? And people say unstructured all the time, right? It's all the different police reports, doctors' reports, right? Doctors' impressions, all the interaction data between the claimant and the claims professional. You got to put it to use, but you got to free it. And that is a data utility that we provide beyond being an AI platform to help them to not feel like they're bound by the legacy platform, right? You still need that legacy platform, but you got to free the data. You got to free the data. And that's what we really focus on.
Yeah, yeah. You were the person that brought this up to me actually in a really succinct way, and it's not that I hadn't thought about it. I've talked on the podcast before about, I've asked questions like, could we have done this at any other point in time? And the answer is, largely no, because we need to get to a certain point of technology kind of fluidity or maturity to kind of be able to implement other systems. But, I wanted to ask you this question that came out of our conversation, was like, how much do core systems impact the ability of the insurance industry to implement change? Because that seems to be at the epicenter of what you're saying.
It is. And I think that, there's only so many, I'd say, buying motions with a core system. So you've got a core system, it's going to last 30 years plus, you're either going to keep it on-prem or you're going to go to a cloud. Okay. There's like only 1 or 2 chess moves here with that. The large chess game that we're playing here is, how do I make sure that I'm using an intelligent layer on top of that core system? And that's where I think all of them are trying to figure out. Core is not just a workflow admin on an underwriting side and on a claim side. It's absolutely providing a decision support and intelligence layer on top of it, whether it's predictive or whether it's allowing you to have intelligence at that moment. And so I think all of them are trying to figure out their capabilities with that. Am I building that in my innovation lab? Am I looking at acquisitions? But a lot of people, when they know, well, I can still free the data and not also have to be on cloud, I can still get some of these capabilities. And that, for us, we don't care. We don't care if you're on-prem or what version you are on any of these core systems. We're just working with your data so that we can get it into a predictive auto machine learning, next generation model so that you can start to use some of these capabilities. And we're not a point solution, right? We know that a lot of carriers, like it's fun, right? It's really neat to see all these neat insurtechs, but that's integration after integration after integration. And so you have to be very thoughtful of your tech team when you're a chief claims officer of, okay, if I can get 70% out of one platform and then they're helping me with the data, then I can go do some of this other point solution as well and not come out and ask for, 100 integrations with all these really cool little, small insurtechs. And I think people are being very thoughtful about that.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, scale's a problem, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm an investor in a SaaS insurtech, and they've had some brilliant conversations, and they solve like multiple challenges. But essentially, they were talking to a very large global insurer, and they said, until you've got significant more investment in the business, we can't invest in you because we don't know you're going to be here in 3
That's
years, 4
right.
years, 5 years time, and we need to think, as you said, about 30 years time, and we're changing, insurance. I think insurance. I don't know what you would think about this question. Sorry, but uh, insurance has actually been constantly evolving and changing and
Mhm.
innovating, and it has this reputation for not. But if you look at different classes of business and like the continuous evolution of like what we're prepared to insure, that shows you that the business is open for change. But the problem is because of the fiduciary responsibility for the kind of legal
Yes,
framework that we operate in, you have to think in 30-year terms. So
that's right.
the tech challenges are incredibly challenging.
That's
Because
exactly right. So I think that the insurtechs that, come in do have to respect the scale, the longevity. They have to respect the long sales cycle at
yeah,
times.
yeah, 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 yeah.
You do have to respect the legacy of all the upstream product processors. And then obviously, as you said, the regulatory frameworks that we have to, be bound by. But that doesn't mean that the innovation has not continued. As you said, new lines have come out because different things have come about with, disasters and so forth. So we've had to get better in using our data and sensors and, even payment engines have gotten better, right? So that we can pay them faster or pay them half or whatever that needs to happen, right? New types of constructs around that. So I do think sometimes insurance does get a tough name when it comes to innovation.
Yeah.
But I think because we do lead a lot with regulatory and we have to, sometimes people hear that first versus some of the really neat moves that we've made in the industry to disrupt.
Yeah, yeah, no, I would agree with that. I mean, referencing this other, I was talking to Aventum, which is very large insurance group. It's a broker on one side and an MGA. I think they're writing a huge amount of numbers. I mean, it's over 1.5 billion in gross premium, but my
Right.
understanding. Um, so it's a big insurance entity. Now, the conversation I had, I was quite surprised to learn that they're building a lot of their own tech in-house, and they're
Yes.
doing that. But and I think that was considered, oh, you don't do that anymore. Now you have to buy it. But we were talking about the amount of configuration required from like a core system to kind of implement, and then the amount of things you want to plug in. It's almost
Yes.
like it was coming back around to say, I think we just need to commit to being tech-focused businesses, and that means we might have to build quite a lot of our own things. So it's interesting to hear you having built Clara to be, we don't sort of agnostic, on-prem, on cloud, doesn't matter. Um, do you think that's a trend we're almost seeing resurface again? I'm interested to see the conversations you've had.
Yeah, it just keeps on going like a circle,
Yeah,
right?
exactly right.
Right. Buy bill. No, bill buy,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Which
yeah,
way are we
exactly,
going here?
exactly. I
Like
was like,
it's
buy
like
versus build
it's
debate,
sailing.
isn't
It's
it?
like
Yeah,
sailing, right? If you're a sailor, right? Just like which way is the wind going how?
yeah,
Well, I do think that a lot earlier, insurance carriers always had really strong technology organizations. And I think they had to figure out, okay, we're going to build out data science teams. Okay, now we need, AI engineers to do some of what is pioneering in the forefront. So I think that they are being very careful in that, as you said, with the configurations, where they're architecting this out, that even with a core system, some of them are still not, are just keeping their, their own core systems instead of not going to some of the brand names. But those that have gone to the brand names are now figuring out, okay, now the wrapper around the core system, are there things that are just tech utilities that we can just go ahead and build? They're going to be commoditized anyway. Okay. And we have the time to wait for that. We don't have a burning platform. And I think they are giving a little bit more opportunity to, bringing in some of the AI engineers into the carrier space. But listen, there's a tsunami of what's going on out there with insurtechs and then all the LLMs and so forth. So I think I've never seen people be a little bit more judicious and very thoughtful on, okay, these pieces, we're going to go ahead and just buy those. This we're going to make sure that we build. And it's not even from a regulatory perspective, Alex. I think it's more just making sure that what is it that they just want to be able, that configuration, like you said, it's hard, the customization. And so knowing that they already have it done on their side, I think people are being really more methodical on that buy now than they were before.
Yeah, I mean, I used the lazy analogy. Well, it wasn't even an analogy earlier. It was just real life experience for us. I mean, like we're a non-regulated business in the recruitment industry. A research firm. We don't do volume business. We do like senior level strategic hiring. Um, we ended up getting a system that was so configurable and so complex that I
Yeah.
ripped it out 8 months in because it was. I was like, I don't have a tech team. And it's like I ended up realizing I needed a developer to come in and work with us and it to get the best out of it. But then I went the other way and I sort of looked at some other systems that weren't configurable enough. And then I'm going, I'm now having to change my product offering because I need to work around this system. So there's this constant like push and pull between total configuration and your ability to do that in the time, oversimplification, so you have to kind of offer a like lesser product, and that's just in my business, that's just in a very simple unregulated market. So yeah, the build versus buy debate, we're not going to solve it here, but I just thought it was interesting to see there's a trend that's going back to sort of building exactly as you say, picking your spots where you can do that building.
It is,
uh,
and I think there's two other factors to that. I think the smaller carriers still don't have the AI engineers. So I think many of them are still buying. I think more tier one, tier threes are thinking more of building. But I think the other thing that's changed so much is if you think about it, right, and just the last couple of years, the expectations of AI, because it's come into our personal life, has gone from, okay, I've been educated, I'm knowledgeable now, I use all this in my personal life. So if that AI is not at 100% of accuracy and it can't be configured right to the way that I want it to be, people almost are like, I'm just going another path.
yeah.
Like the whole patience now and the expectation is at a totally new level
Mm.
than what I've seen. And so honestly, in the last year, and ChatGPT started that, and then the LLMs, and then people have the bars have just changed with the tsunami over the last 6 months of honestly their tolerance level. And I always tell people that, you know, models have learned, right? Different than the LLMs. And so, we give our kids time to learn from kindergarten how to read and write and words to sentences and all of that. And models had to go through the same thing. And so, people didn't want 85% accuracy, they want 95% accuracy. And
Yeah.
so all of that, I think that is the biggest change besides the buy versus build is an expectation on what AI should do for me and around accuracy. And absolutely, it's got to work out of the box. It's almost like, I don't know about you, but the muscle of doing implementations of core systems, people were used to, okay, look, this testing, it's going to just, I know I'm going to have testing. I know I'm going to have unit testing and system testing, and it's going to take a while. They don't have that same perspective on AI. They believe it should work at 100% right when it's implemented and deployed. It's a very interesting dynamic that's different.
Mm. I completely agree with you, and it's something that I've gone on about this quite a lot on the podcast, in that I talk about just kind of like learn behavior from technology in your personal life impacting how you look at technology in your professional life. We've had that conversation before, and I said, mine was, even if you think about comparing other businesses in your personal life, before Amazon, we didn't think it was literally the standard, like table stakes to get next day delivery. Now, if I'm buying something online, if I have to pay for delivery, I nearly fall off my chair. If I
Yeah.
then have to and it's going to take like a week,
Yeah.
which is insane. I mean, it's an insane kind of thought process, and sometimes you have to take a step back, but you
You
can't.
know what? It's not even a week here. Like if it's going to take less than, if it's taking more than 24 hours here,
Yeah,
in the US, people are like, what do you mean? I should have this by tomorrow morning. I mean, it has. It's
yeah.
dramatically changed.
I had to. I bought a brand new. I dropped my mobile phone and broke my phone the other week, and on top of getting it stolen, actually, I had one phone stolen, then I broke another one. I'm not doing very well, but I bought a new phone. So it's quite a relatively expensive purchase, and I had to pay for delivery. And I was
Oh yeah.
furious about it. I'm going,
After you've already
why?
paid all that amount of money, are
I
you
was like,
kidding
why am I
me?
paying £3.99 for delivery? But I realised, no, I'm not paying for delivery. I'm paying so I get delivery tomorrow rather than next week, which is crazy. So yeah, I think those kind of like those learned behaviours come over. In a related way, I wanted to talk to you about AI and talent attraction. So
Yes.
you touched on it about smaller companies, smaller insurance companies not being able to have the engineering talent. How do you think AI adoption is impacting our sort of Gen Z talent attraction? Because there's two sides to it. One, you can use some AI in it, but I see it as kind of a war for us getting that talent into the business, makes us more exciting as the insurance industry. But then I just wonder, are we creating a talent war we can't win? Because you can't have unlimited upside in insurance. You can only make as much as the premium will allow. In other industries, you don't have those ceilings. So yeah, what do you think it's doing with us trying to attract these kind of Gen Z new
Yeah.
talents into our industry?
What's a premium right now for some of these AI engineers, as you know,
Yeah, of course.
with the really interesting, both from a growth startup companies as well as some of the larger tech Silicon Valley companies. I think that those folks are may pop in to insurance and spend a little time and then pop back out because I think they'll get bored with, as you said, there is a ceiling of what we can do. And I think they're going to have to, for their own mind, like I'll come in and I'll help take this to another level with my AI engineering background. But then I'm going to go back out and be an AI scientist back in, some of these other growth or larger leading technology companies. It's interesting too, because with the way that coding now that, models can get you there at an accelerated path, it allows them to do different type of work than what used to take us over the years of just coding and coding and coding. And so that mentality, I think, is very different. I think we've got to continue to make sure that Gen Z, as well as Generation Alpha, that are the middle school and high schoolers right now, that again have, I don't know if you've ever sat down with 12 and 13-year-olds versus the 20-year-olds. It's very different. Gen Z from Gen Alpha, you would have thought because they're all growing up in this AI, they have such very different the alphas are already, they start with AI, right? Whereas the Gen Z have a little bit of traditional, and then they are still trying to figure out how to bring AI in. It's a very different dynamic between those two generations. And so, yeah, I think that the insurance industry, thank goodness we have insurtechs, because I think that's where we're going to continue to see some of this talent be able to come in and help us, frankly. We need to have insurtechs. We need to have this in our ecosystem. It keeps us thriving. It keeps us disrupting. when you can bring it in is the timing of it all, right? That's what happens with it.
Mm. I think that the positive noise I would have on this as someone that does what I do, and we work with predominantly venture-backed insurtech, so at the
Yes,
more innovative end of that. But then we do work with traditional carriers where they're trying to build innovation functions. So, we've done some really fun, cool projects where we built an AI team for an innovation team in a large carrier, and that was
right.
great fun. And but what's interesting for me, and the positive light at the end of the tunnel, I would say, on this kind of talent attraction is that when we get people here, they don't often want to leave. And we have lots of conversations going, well, I've done that journey, or maybe they've exited, or maybe sadly sometimes it doesn't work out and there's been out funding, or they're just looking for a new role because they've been in situ for a few years. They're going, but I've really fallen in love with the challenge here, the people
Yes,
here, and particularly the people. Actually, I think the people. It's. You've worked in quite a number of industries, and
I have.
there is something special in the water here.
Yeah, in the culture. I agree with you. Sometimes it's just about where someone is in their respective life. And if they have done as you know, the grind
Mhm.
of being a part of a growth company, sometimes they want to just go and be a part of a large enterprise
Yeah,
and make change there. But then you also have some really strong AI scientists out there that are just going to stay out there and not come into insurance and want to just partner and help to accelerate.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think the one thing that one of the things that we've done badly in the past has been a bit too rigid on how we work with outside suppliers, etc. And that's a little bit to do with cultural kind of shifts in what people want to do from a work perspective. And that, my I've mentioned this before on the pod, but my uncle's a professor of algorithmic theory, and is very heavily involved in things like LLMs and data science. And he's just not. He's a feral beast. You're not going to get him to work for an insurance company full time,
Oh,
but he'd love to run a project, which he
totally,
has done, and
totally.
he's done oil and gas, and it's just new academic challenges for him.
That's right.
Um, but for us, it's the lifeblood of our innovation.
But we need all those personas. We need all of
Yes,
them.
we do. We do. I wanted to, on that kind of point, something that you and I discussed before. I do sometimes feel that Gen Z, and well, moving into Gen Alpha now, but Gen Z, that's too much of the focus. I mean, every panel I'm ever asked to be on, it's like, talk to us about Gen Z and how we attract them. And I was like, can't we talk about redeploying the people that maybe losing their roles because of innovation, and how do we redeploy them? Because they've got their insurance smarts.
Yeah, they have
Are we
experience.
are
Yeah.
we missing an opportunity to sort of redeploy some of the more senior talent? And does Gen Z just still too much of the limelight, do you think?
No, I love that question because I do think the experienced claims professionals in that domain, we have to, and it's hard because so many of them do work remote, and I'd say in prior years they used to like be together, right? So you'd have more of think about the times when the boomers and the Gen X would like be in rooms together. There'd be experiences, there'd be scenarios, and they would learn from each other. That's how knowledge transfer would happen in a claims organization. And then obviously over, the last 5, 6 years, as the millennials and Gen Zs, right, they have lost some of that ability to be with those experienced claims professionals. So you've lost that knowledge transfer. So how do you take that generation that is, 5, 10 years from retirement now before the cliff hits, and push that back into these other generations coming through in the claims industry? I think that's something that we need to solve for. That, yes, systems can do that from a knowledge transfer perspective. But, one of the things that I think is really important as these new tools come out, even, Clara, is that we keep the human in the loop. We still need their critical thinking. And we know there's a cognitive overload with the amount of data and the number of cases that they have as claims adjusters and claims supervisors. But if the Alpha and Z and millennial generations get so used to the tools doing the thinking, we're going to lose what the Gen X and the boomers had in learning cases in the most raw format ever, right? And
Mm.
how do you bring those two together? Because that's my fear of, yes, I want them to use the AI systems, but I don't want them lose their critical thinking.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's been a big concern for me, and we talked about this before because one of the things I was concerned about was if we only had like if we take away the kind of entry level learning, doing the kind of grunt work side of claims, the two things that I worried about would happen. It's like one, that's really positive because that means no one particularly wants to do that part, so you're left with like higher level decision making. But then do you have like decision fatigue where you have people only working on really kind of like uh, reference points? Now the technology is improving all the time to the point where it probably negates that, but there's definitely a structural kind of concern around that, and then obviously the training.
Yeah, I mean, Alex, look, I think there's going to be a point, like a Clara in a few years that with a core system that a claims adjuster is all they're going to have to do, because the way that automation with process and automation of decision support, right, with the AI models, I think a claim is going to come in, a case is going to come in, and the automation is just going to go right in the workflow. And what's going to pop up is for a case adjuster just to basically have, do you want to do A, B, or C? And push a button.
Yeah.
Okay. And then it comes back. Do you want to do A, B, or C? And push a button. Like it's going to get so automated, I believe, with both decision support and the workflow, that they're just going to be given a multiple choice of what, because they're liable. So that, they have to still, we still have to be non-prescriptive from liability. They're just going to push a button to say, do this with the case, do this with the case. That's what I believe a claims platform for Gen Alpha and Gen Z will look like in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I do have a slightly I, I have a concern that there's two ends to AI, and it's like it sort of meets in the middle where we're building AI tools to remove the mundane work.
Right.
But then there's an argument that they get so good that the only thing left is the human in the loop, arguably the kind of like exactly that, like just making decisions. And we don't know what that working environment is like. I have no idea what that is like. And so, I think there's some really interesting kind of social change and societal change that will happen around that kind of work and the meaningfulness of work. I've been very open on here of saying that, the left-leaning hippie side of me is a bit like, well, now we've got all these tools, why don't we just work 2.5 days a week and we have a bit more time off and we get paid the same?
Right.
I can't see that being a popular decision for quite a lot of people. So,
Right.
but yeah. We're at time, and I knew we'd get here, but I never want to end on kind of without looking at the future. So, Clara's continuously innovating, continuously doing things differently. What can we expect to see from you in the business in the next 6-12 months, as it were?
Yeah, I think that obviously we're coming out with our agentic reasoning, which is really how do we use every model output of all of our specialized models, all of the data we're getting in, whether it's in documents or interactions from a text or call perspective. How do we really, like I was saying to you, how do we surface up the reasoning of what should be thought about as next steps to an adjuster? Based on there's so much more data that's available that can really help to hit the bullseye of reasoning for them of how to move forward. And so you're going to start to hear me talk a lot about our version of agentic AI, not from an automation where you may see a lot of core systems. Ours is agentic reasoning. So you're going to start to hear me talk more about that over the next 6 months.
Amazing. Brilliant. Well, look, I hope to stay connected and find out
Yes,
more
Alex.
about what you're doing. I'm sure we'll see each other at the slew of events that we always have to be at. So I hope we get a chance to meet in person. But Heather, I wanted to thank you personally for taking the time out of your day. I know you're really busy.
Thank you, Alex, for having me this morning.
No, not at all. Thank you.